Close your eyes and feel the warmth on your face, the kind that presses gently against your eyelids even when they are shut. A sensation of light so absolute that it feels like weight, like a heavy golden blanket draped over the surface of the world. We are not in the present anymore, nor are we in a specific year that can be written down with numbers, but rather we are drifting in the deep, vast center of our human story, a time when the earth itself feels younger, turning slowly under a sun that seems closer, louder, and more demanding than the pale star we know today. Breathe in the air here. It is dry and smells of scorched stone, of withered grass turning to dust, and of the metallic tang of heat rising in shimmering waves from the cracked earth. There is a sound here too, not of machines or voices, but the immense vibrating silence of the savanna at noon, broken only by the dry rattle of acacia leaves and the low, rhythmic thrumming of insects hidden in the tall stalks, a choir of millions singing the song of the heat. We imagine this change, the turning of human skin from the color of the night to the color of the cloud, happened suddenly, perhaps as a singular event marked by a storm or a migration, but the truth seems slower, quieter, and far more unsettling, like the erosion of a mountain or the gradual evaporation of a sea. It feels like a single moment when we look back across the chasm of millennia, but for those who lived it, there was no change at all, only the endless cyclical present where the sun was the undisputed king and the skin was the armor forged to meet it. Here, in the cradle of our species, near the equator where the light falls not at an angle but straight down like a hammer, to be human is to be dark. It is not a variation, it is the fundamental state, the baseline of existence, a beautiful saturated richness that wraps the body in the colors of obsidian, of rich loam, of the deepest shadows beneath the canopy. The skin here is not merely a covering, but a shield, a complex and perfect technology woven from the very chemistry of life to catch the relentless bombardment of the sun. We often think of darkness as the absence of light, but here, in the ancient beginning, darkness is the mastery of light, a deliberate biological embrace that swallows the sun's fury so that the delicate machinery of the blood flowing beneath can survive. Imagine looking at your own arm in this ancient light. The skin is smooth, tight, and profoundly pigmented, a living barrier that stops the ultraviolet arrows before they can shatter the folate in your blood, that vital nutrient needed to build the next generation. It is a perfect system, balanced on the razor's edge of survival, where the sun gives energy but threatens to steal the future, and the skin stands guard, a silent sentinel of melanin that says, "You may warm us, but you shall not burn us." Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. As we drift back to that savanna, notice how the heat feels safe because you are protected, wrapped in this cloak of midnight that our ancestors wore for tens of thousands of years. It is a time of immense stability, where the days are equal to the nights, and the seasons are measured not by cold but by rain, by the greening of the hills and the drying of the streams. There is no concept of white or pale here. Such a thing would be a sickness, a vulnerability, a ghostly transparency that would leave a hunter weak and broken under the midday glare. To be pale here would be to die. And so, generation after generation, the people remain dark, their bodies perfected by the pressure of the latitude. Mothers look at their newborns and see the promise of survival in the richness of their color, a deep protective pigment that deepens as the child walks for the first time into the open plains. We assume, with our modern eyes, that humanity was restless to change, to shed this armor, but the fossil record and the silent testimony of our genes tell us otherwise. We held on to this darkness with a fierce necessity. It was not a fashion, but a fortress. For nearly all of human history, to look human was to look like the night sky. But the world is not static. It is a restless sleeper, tossing and turning, shifting its climate and its currents, opening green corridors across deserts that were once impassable. And slowly, without a council meeting or a declaration, small bands of these perfect sun-proof people begin to walk. They do not know they are leaving the garden of the sun. They follow the herds. They follow the scent of water. They follow the mysterious pull of the horizon that always promises something better just out of sight. They walk north and they walk east, out of Africa and into the Levant, into the unmapped vastness of Eurasia. They carry their spears, their fire, and their stories, but they also carry their skin, that heavy, dark armor designed for the equator. They do not leave it behind because they do not know they can. It is who they are. As they cross the invisible lines of latitude, moving away from the direct vertical gaze of the sun, the light begins to change. It hits the atmosphere at a slant, filtering through more air, losing its biting intensity, softening into something golden and diffuse. The hammer becomes a caress. The fierce burning star that demanded a shield begins to retreat, dipping lower in the sky, hiding behind banks of gray cloud and mist. And yet, the people do not change. Not yet. They walk into the cooling world wearing the armor of the heat, a mismatch that the universe has not yet corrected. It is a slow tension, a biological contradiction walking on two legs, a body built to repel the sun entering a land where the sun is dying away. They sit around fires in the deepening twilight of the north, their faces illuminated by the orange glow, still dark, still protected, unaware that the shield which saved them in the south is slowly, quietly, beginning to turn against them. The wind shifts, blowing cold from the glaciers that sit like sleeping giants on the horizon, carrying the scent of ice and pine, a scent that is alien and sharp. The days grow shorter. The shadows lengthen. And deep inside the bone, in the quiet marrow where the blood is made, a silent hunger begins to stir, a chemical question asked by the body that finds no answer in the darkening sky, a request for light that the dark skin, so faithful and so strong, simply cannot let in. The feet move first, and the body follows, a slow, meandering river of humanity flowing through the gates of the Sinai, trickling up along the coastal spines of the Mediterranean, and venturing into lands where no human footprint had ever broken the crust of the earth before. It is not a march, for marches imply a destination, and these people have nowhere to go but forward, pushed by the subtle pressures of a drying waterhole or the lure of a herd moving north. It is a drift, a generational exhaling of people spreading out across the skin of the planet, moving so slowly that a child might be born only a few miles from where its grandmother died. Yet over the course of 10,000 years, this slow creep covers continents. As they walk, the world around them begins to lose its sharp high-contrast edges. The air grows heavy with moisture, smelling of damp oak and decaying leaves, rather than the crisp, baked dust of the savanna. The sky, once a hard, infinite dome of perfect azure, begins to soften, often veiled by heavy blankets of gray cloud that hang low over the hills, filtering the sun until it is nothing more than a pale, glowing disk, like a coin at the bottom of a river. They are crossing an invisible threshold, a line drawn not on the ground, but in the atmosphere itself, roughly at the latitude where the curve of the earth begins to lean away from the sun. No one announces this crossing. There is no sudden cold snap that warns them they have gone too far, only a gradual creeping gentleness in the light. The sun, their ancient father, who once stood directly overhead at noon, casting no shadow, now begins to slide toward the southern horizon. Even at midday, the light strikes them at an angle, slanting through the atmosphere, forcing its way through miles of scattering air that strips away the fierce ultraviolet intensity. It is a softer world, a world of twilight and long, stretching shadows that mimic the shapes of the trees and the ridges. And here lies the quiet, unnoticed tragedy of their migration. They are still wearing the armor of the equator in a land where the enemy has vanished. Their skin is still rich with melanin, dark as the basalt rocks they climb over, designed to swallow a sun that no longer burns. They are like knights wandering into a peaceful meadow without realizing they can take off their heavy iron plates. They carry the night on their skin, but the day is no longer bright enough to justify it. It feels perhaps like a relief at first. The heat does not hammer them down. The burns that once plagued the shoulders of the careless do not happen here. But the body is a creature of balance, and every protection has a cost. In the south, the dark skin was a gatekeeper, shutting out the lethal excess of radiation while letting in just enough to spark the vital chemistry of vitamin D in the deep layers of the epidermis. But here, in the growing shadows of Europe and northern Asia, the sun is too weak to knock on the door. It taps gently, feebly, and the dark skin, faithful to its ancient programming, turns it away. The gate remains locked. The synthesis slows. The silent factories in the blood that build the bone and fortify the immune system begin to stutter, deprived of the solar fuel they have relied upon for millions of years. Yet, nature is slow to correct such things. Evolution is not a watchful architect who immediately fixes a flaw. It is a blind, drifting process that only notices a problem when it becomes a catastrophe. And so, for thousands of years, the people remain dark. They wrap themselves in the furs of bears and wolves to ward off the chill, covering their skin and further hiding it from the meager light. They huddle in caves as the winters lengthen, the sun disappearing for weeks at a time behind walls of sleet and snow. It is a time of immense atmospheric moodiness, where the wind howls through the valleys and the trees stand like skeletons against the white ground. We might imagine that they felt out of place, these tropical wanderers in a glacial land, but human memory is short. After a few generations, this gray, misty world is the only world they know. The stories of the burning sun become myths, tales told by the elders of a time when the sky was made of fire and the earth was made of dust. Now, the sky is made of water and the earth is made of mud. They adapt their tools. They chip distinct sharp blades from flint to slice through thick hides. They learn to read the movements of the reindeer and the mammoth, but they do not adapt their skin. It remains stubborn, a biological relic of a home they can no longer return to. Scientists still debate exactly how long this mismatch lasted, how many thousands of winters passed with dark-skinned hunters tracking game across the white tundra. But the evidence from ancient skeletons suggests it was an incredibly long stubbornness. The genes for paleness were simply not there, or if they were rare, sleeping quietly in the population, offering no immediate advantage that could be seized upon. And so they walked on, deeper into the north, deeper into the trap. The light grew fainter with every degree of latitude. The winter nights grew longer, stretching to devour the afternoon. The sun became a ghost, a fleeting visitor that offered no warmth, no power, just a pale illumination that barely penetrated the canopy of the encroaching forests. And inside the bodies of the people, the silence grew deeper. The bones waited for a signal that did not come. The immune systems waited for a boost that was blocked at the surface. They were walking towards a biological crisis, a slow-motion collision between their history and their geography. But for now, they were strong. They were masters of the stone and the spear, the kings of the new wild, standing tall and dark against the blue-white glaciers, breathing the cold air, watching the aurora borealis dance overhead like green fire, unaware that they were slowly becoming invisible to the sun, hiding from the very thing that sustained them, drifting further and further into a shadow that they carried with them, woven into the very fabric of their own skin. The landscape here feels like a different planet, a world stripped of color and noise, reduced to the elemental binaries of white snow and black rock, blue ice and gray sky. We are in the deep Paleolithic north, near the edges of the great ice sheets that smother the top of the world, a place where the wind carries a biting metallic taste, and the silence is so profound, it rings in the ears like a bell. It is a world of extreme contrast, where the sun hangs low and weak on the horizon, barely lifting itself above the frozen peaks even at noon, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch for miles across the glittering plains. We have been taught to imagine the people of this time, the robust, stoic hunters navigating the Ice Age, as pale figures, their skin matching the snow, blending into the white void like polar bears. It is an image that feels intuitive, a simple logic of camouflage and climate, but the bones and the ancient DNA tell a different, stranger story. one that defies our simple assumptions. These people, standing on the edge of the glaciers, wrapping their bodies in heavy furs against the biting wind, were not pale. They were dark. Their skin was a rich, deep brown, perhaps even black, a striking silhouette against the blinding whiteness of their world. Their eyes were often piercingly blue, a genetic anomaly that had already swept through the population like a quiet wave. But their faces remained the color of the earth they had left behind. It seems impossible, a contradiction that nature should have solved. How could they survive here, in this land of shadow and ice, with skin designed for the equator? The answer lies not in the sky, but in the blood. Watch them now, gathered around a kill on the frozen steppe. They are not farmers. They do not toil in the soil for meager grains. They are apex predators, lords of the megafauna. They hunt the mammoth, the reindeer, the bison, and the great wild horses that thunder across the permafrost. And in the flesh of these animals, they find their salvation. The meat is dark and rich, laden with iron and vitamins. The livers, the kidneys, the fatty marrow they suck from the cracked bones. These are not just food, they are chemical treasure chests. They are bursting with vitamin D, the very nutrient the sun is failing to give them. By consuming the animals that have spent their lives grazing and concentrating the sun's energy into their own tissues, the hunters are bypassing the need for their skin to do the work. They are eating the sun. It is a biological loophole, a way to cheat the latitude. They do not need to be pale because they are so well fed. Their diet is a shield that protects them from the consequences of their own darkness. The ocean, too, offers its bounty. Where the ice meets the sea, they hunt seals and fish, their bodies gleaming with oil, consuming the rich blubber that is saturated with the stolen light of the ocean's surface. So they thrive. They grow tall and strong, their bones dense and heavy, showing no signs of the rickets or the weakness that should haunt a dark-skinned people in the north. They are the Western hunter-gatherers, a distinct and powerful lineage that dominated Europe for thousands of years, a people of striking beauty and resilience. Imagine a group of them moving across a frozen lake, the ice cracking and booming beneath their feet like thunder. The wind whips their dark hair, their blue eyes scanning the horizon for the silhouette of a herd. They are comfortable here. They have mastered the fire, which they carry in smoldering fungus wrapped in birch bark. They have mastered the needle, sewing tight, waterproof garments that fit like a second skin. And they have mastered the diet, unlocking the nutrients hidden in the blood of the wild. They do not feel the need to change. Evolution is a thrifty editor. It does not rewrite a page unless the story stops making sense. And for now, the story still works. The balance holds. The dark skin remains, perhaps serving other purposes now. Protection against the fierce glare of the sun reflecting off the snow, a blinding, multi-directional radiation that can burn even in the cold. Or perhaps it is simply momentum, the genetic memory of Africa refusing to fade because nothing is forcing it to. They live in a kind of suspended animation, a biological stasis where culture and skill have outpaced the slow grind of natural selection. They are a testament to human adaptability, proving that we do not always need to change our bodies if we can change our behavior. But the ice is not eternal. The world is turning. The great glaciers are beginning to weep, their edges softening and retreating, pulling back to reveal the scarred earth beneath. The climate is shifting, warming, bringing with it a new force that will challenge their survival in a way the cold never did. The open steppes, the endless visibility where a hunter could see for miles, are disappearing. In their place, something green and chaotic is rising from the soil. The trees are coming. Birch, pine, oak, and hazel. They march north, reclaiming the land and swallowing the horizons, casting a new and deeper shadow over the world. The era of the blue ice and the black rock is ending, and the era of the forest is beginning. The hunters watch the tree line creep forward, unaware that these green sentinels are bringing with them a new kind of darkness, a canopy that will filter the light even further, closing the sky and changing the rules of the game once again. The loophole is about to close, though they cannot hear the sound of it shutting. They sharpen their flint, laugh in the cold air, and feast on the red meat of the reindeer, the last kings of a world that is quietly melting away beneath their feet. Let us drift into this feasting time, lingering in the smoke and the grease of the Mesolithic, a period that feels like a long, satisfied exhale after the tension of the Ice Age. The great freeze has broken, and the world is flush with life, wet and teeming. We are with the Western hunter-gatherers still, those dark-skinned, blue-eyed ghosts of the European forests, but the landscape around them has softened into a verdant, dripping abundance. It is a time of the red deer. The massive herds of reindeer have followed the retreating ice north, vanishing into the mist, and in their place, the red deer have emerged from the southern refuges, moving silently through the dappled light of the new woodlands. These animals are sleek, elusive, and powerful, their antlers branching like the oak trees they hide amongst. For the people, life is a rhythm of the hunt and the river. The urgency of the frozen tundra is gone, replaced by a lush, resource-rich stability. They settle near the water, the grand, slow-moving rivers that snake through the continent, the widening estuaries, and the coastlines where the sea levels are rising, drowning the old land bridges. Here, the diet that protects their dark skin reaches its peak. It is a feast of immense variety. They build weirs of woven hazel to catch the salmon migrating upstream, fish so rich in oil they burn like candles when thrown on the fire. They gather mounds of shellfish, leaving behind great middens of oyster and mussel shells that will confuse archaeologists thousands of years later, monuments of calcium and gluttony. They hunt the wild boar, dangerous and bristling, whose meat is dense with the forest's energy. And above all, they hunt the red deer. Watch a group of them now, moving through the undergrowth with a silence that seems supernatural. They are painted in patterns of ochre and ash, blending into the flickering shadows of the canopy. When the stag falls, pierced by a flint-tipped arrow, nothing is wasted. The feast that follows is not just a meal. It is a ritual of biological fortification. They eat the organs, the dark, blood-rich tissues where the animal has stored the sun. They crack the bones for the marrow. They consume the fish whole, bones and all. In this way, they are bathing their insides in vitamin D. It is this immense, specialized intake of wild foods that allows them to defy the latitude. They are living in a chemical grace period. The sky above is often gray, the sun shielded by the thick leaves of the primeval forest, but their blood is singing with nutrients. They do not need the sun to penetrate their skin because they are swallowing the sun in every bite of salmon, in every strip of deer liver. It is a perfect equilibrium between culture and biology. They are healthy, their teeth strong and straight, their skeletons robust, capable of immense physical exertion. There is a sense of timelessness here, a feeling that this way of life could continue forever. They are the masters of their domain, deeply attuned to the cycles of the moon and the spawning of the fish. They carve intricate totems from antler, smooth and polished. They bury their dead with reverence, sprinkling them with red ochre, perhaps to give them the color of life in the darkness of the grave. But there is a fragility to this abundance that they cannot see. It relies entirely on the wild. It relies on the population remaining small enough that the land can support them with high-grade protein. It relies on the rivers teeming with fish and the forests being thick with game. It is a system that works only as long as the balance of nature remains untouched. They are seemingly invincible, these dark hunters of the green woods, but they are specialists, and specialists are always vulnerable to change. And change is drifting towards them, not from the sky this time, but from the southeast. Far away in the lands we now call Anatolia and the Levant, something fundamental has shifted. People there have stopped chasing the food and have started making it. They have domesticated the wild grasses. They have tamed the sheep and the goat. They are living in dense villages, their hands perpetually covered in the dust of the threshing floor. These farmers are different. They are smaller, slighter of build. Their skin is lighter, not white, but a pale olive, a tawny shade that sits somewhere between the dark hunter and the pale future. They are breeding rapidly, their numbers swelling with the reliable, starchy calories of wheat and barley. They are beginning to move, spilling out of the Near East, carrying their seeds and their animals, looking for new land to break. The hunters in the forest do not know this yet. They only know the rhythm of the red deer and the run of the salmon. They do not know that a wave is coming that will wash away their world of wild meat and river fat. They do not know that the very diet that keeps their dark skin viable is about to be replaced by a diet of stone-ground grain, a diet that fills the belly but starves the bone of the sun's vitamins. For now, the feast continues. The smoke rises through the trees, carrying the scent of roasting venison. The children play in the river, their dark bodies gleaming in the water, splashing in the shallows, chasing the silver flash of minnows. They are the last of their kind, the final generation to live in this perfect, unconscious harmony with the wild nutrients of the earth. The forest holds them in its green embrace, protecting them, feeding them, keeping the ancient colors of the South alive in the cool North. But the trees are whispering, the wind is changing direction. And on the edge of the great forests, the first trees are falling, cut by stone axes not to build shelters, but to clear the ground for the sun. The farmers are coming, and with them, the silent hunger that will finally force the skin to fade. The world breathes in, and when it exhales, it breathes out green. The ice has not just retreated. It has been chased away by a relentless creeping tide of life that surges northward with a speed that, in geological time, is nothing short of an explosion. We are witnessing the birth of the great wildwood, a living entity so vast and unbroken that it will come to define the continent for thousands of years. It begins with the hardy pioneers, the birches and the pines that cling to the rocky debris left by the glaciers, shivering in the cool wind, their roots seeking purchase in the raw, scraped earth. But behind them comes the heavy infantry of the plant kingdom, the slow, majestic conquerors that demand warmth and deep soil, the oaks, the elms, the limes, and the hazels. They march up the river valleys and storm the hillsides, dropping their seeds and widening their reach until the tundra is nothing but a memory buried beneath a thick carpet of rotting leaves. The open, endless horizons where a hunter could once stand on a ridge and see the curve of the earth are gone. In their place is a wall of wood. The sky, which had been a constant, overwhelming presence in the lives of the people, is now stolen from them. It is replaced by a rustling, shifting ceiling of interlocking branches and translucent leaves, a green canopy that knits itself so tightly together that the sun becomes a rumor, a distant god that visits only in shattered fragments of light dancing on the forest floor. To walk into this forest is to walk into a twilight that never truly ends. The air here is heavy and still, saturated with the moisture trapped by the trees, smelling of wet moss, fungal decay, and the rich, sweet fermentation of the soil. It is a humid, enclosed world, a cathedral of silence where the sound of a snapping twig rings out like a gunshot. The dark-skinned hunters, who once navigated by the stars and the distant shapes of mountains, must now learn a new way of seeing. They become creatures of the understory, moving through a landscape of vertical shadows and sudden intimate clearings. The forest changes their relationship with the light. On the open steppe, the sun struck them from all sides, from above and reflected from below off the snow or the bright limestone. But here, the light is filtered, stripped of its power. The leaves act as a massive planetary pair of sunglasses, absorbing the red and blue wavelengths and scattering the green, letting only a gentle, diffused glow reach the ground. Scientists call this the closed canopy phase of the Holocene, a time when the forest was so dense that a squirrel, it is said, could travel from the Atlantic coast to the Black Sea without ever touching the ground. For the humans moving through this endless green tunnel, the lack of direct sunlight is profound. Their skin, still rich with the melanin of the equator, is now wrapped in a permanent shadow. They are living in a world of gloom, even at high noon. The forest protects them from the wind and the cold, yes, but it also hides them from the ultraviolet radiation they need. The trap is tightening. They are deep in the northern latitudes where the sun is already weak, and now they have placed a roof over their heads. Yet, they do not feel the loss. Not yet. The forest is generous in other ways. It is a larder of immense variety. The hazelnut trees drop their bounty in the autumn, covering the ground in millions of calorie-dense shells, which the people roast on flat stones, the smell of toasting nuts drifting through the trees like a warm memory. The wild boars rout through the bracken, fat and plentiful. The red deer, though harder to spot in the dense brush, are still there. The diet holds the line. The fish in the shaded streams still carry the vitamin D. The liver of the boar still holds the chemical echo of the sun. So the people remain dark, blending perfectly into the shadows of the tree trunks, invisible to their prey until the moment the spear flies. They are the ghosts of the wood, their bodies painted with ash and charcoal to match the gloom. There is a psychological shift here too, a turning inward. In the open plains, the eyes looked out. In the forest, the eyes look close. The world becomes smaller, more immediate. The texture of bark, the track of a wolf in the mud, the specific bend of a branch. Time seems to slow down in the woods, measured not by the sweep of the sun, but by the slow rot of a fallen log or the seasonal shedding of the leaves. It is a comforting, womb-like existence, sheltered and quiet. But outside this green embrace, the world is not sleeping. While the hunters drift through their eternal twilight, unaware that their dark skin is becoming a heavier burden with every passing century of shade, the edges of the forest are beginning to fray. The climate, having reached a peak of warmth and wetness, stabilizes. And far to the southeast, the drift of the farmers has turned into a steady migration. They are bringing with them something that hates the shadow, the seed of the wheat. Wheat needs the sun. It cannot grow in the gloom of the oak and the elm. It demands a clearing. And so, the clash that is coming is not just between two groups of people, but between two worlds, the world of the shadow and the world of the light. The forest, which seems so invincible, so thick and endless, is made of wood, and wood can burn. The stone axes of the farmers are polished and sharp, and they are hungry for the sky. The dark hunters hear the distant sound of chopping, the rhythmic thud of stone against timber, echoing through the trees like a heartbeat that does not belong to the forest. They smell the smoke of intentional fires, distinct from the lightning strikes they know. These are fires of clearing, fires of erasure. The canopy is being torn open. The sun is being invited back down to the earth, but it is coming for the grass, not for the hunters. And as the trees fall, retreating before the stone adze and the torch, the protective diet of the wild vanishes with them. The stage is being set for a biological reckoning where the dark skin, deprived of its forest shield and its wild feast, will finally face the full, starving silence of the northern bone. The green darkness, which felt like a home, was merely a waiting room, holding the genetic code in stasis until the arrival of the grain changed everything. Listen now to a new sound, rising from the valleys, a sound that has never been heard in the north before. It is not the wind, nor the call of the wolf, nor the cracking of ice. It is a rhythmic, grinding friction, a low, stone-on-stone hum that begins at dawn and does not stop until the sun sinks below the ridge. It is the sound of the quern, the heavy saddlestone rubbing against the grain, crushing the hard seeds of the earth into a soft, white dust. This is the heartbeat of the Neolithic, the pulse of a new world that has arrived slowly, carried on the backs of weary travelers who have walked for generations out of the crumbling empires of the Near East. They are the sowers of wheat, the tamers of the chaotic wild, and they bring with them a transformation that is total and irreversible. Look at them as they clear the land near the riverbanks. They are different from the tall, dark hunters who watch them from the shadows of the tree line. These newcomers are shorter, slighter of build, their bodies shaped by centuries of bending over the soil. Their skin is lighter, a warm, tawny olive that speaks of the Mediterranean sun. Yet, it is not the pale skin of the future. It is merely a lighter shade of the ancient brown. They do not live in the moment of the kill. They live in the future of the harvest. They burn the great oaks to make room for their fields, creating scars of open sky in the endless canopy. In these clearings the wheat rises, golden uniform demanding. It is a miracle crop, a grass that offers a promise no hunter can make, the promise that there will be food tomorrow and next month and next winter. It can be stored in clay pots, kept dry and safe, a hedge against the starvation that always stalks the wild. But this security comes with a terrible, invisible price, a cost that is not paid in sweat, but in the silent chemistry of the body. As the people settle, as they build their longhouses of timber and daub, they begin to abandon the ancient diet of the coast and the forest. The feasts of oily salmon, the rich iron-heavy livers of the red deer, the vitamin D-packed blubber of the seal, these become memories, occasional treats rather than daily fuel. In their place comes the grain. They eat porridge. They eat flatbreads baked on hot stones. They eat lentils and peas. Their bellies are full. Indeed, the population explodes, for wheat can feed 10 mouths where the deer could feed only one. But while the stomach is satisfied, the deep biology of the body enters a state of quiet panic. The grain is rich in energy, but it is empty of the sun. It holds almost no vitamin D. It blocks the absorption of minerals. It is a diet of caloric wealth and nutritional poverty. And here, the trap of the skin snaps shut. For thousands of years, the dark pigmentation of the hunters was sustained by their food. They did not need the sun to synthesize vitamins because they ate them. But now, the farmers and the hunters who slowly, hesitantly join them are relying on the bread. They have cut the chemical lifeline of the wild diet. Suddenly, the skin is no longer just a neutral covering. It becomes a barrier, a wall that stands between the starving bone and the only source of salvation left, the weak northern sun. The atmosphere above them is still gray, the winters are still long, and the light is still feeble. The dark skin, doing its ancient job, blocks the ultraviolet rays, unaware that the body inside is screaming for them. It is a hidden hunger, a starvation that does not feel like an emptiness in the belly, but manifests as a deep, aching softness in the skeleton. Scientists drifting through this timeline notice a subtle, heartbreaking change in the human form. The people of the early farming era begin to shrink. They lose the towering height of the Paleolithic hunters. Their teeth, once straight and strong in wide, powerful jaws, begin to crowd and rot, softened by the sugary starch and the lack of hard chewing. But the most profound change happens in the darkness of the marrow. Without the vitamin D from fish and game, and without the ability to make it through their dark skin in the low-light north, the calcium cannot bind. The bones become pliable. The pelvis narrows. The legs of children bow slightly under their own weight. It is not a plague that kills them instantly. It is a slow, generational weakening, a fraying of the biological wire. The dark skin, once the ultimate protector, the hero of the equator, has become a liability, a curtain drawn too tightly against a window that needs to be open. They do not understand this, of course. They do not know what a vitamin is. They only know that the winters feel harder, that the elders ache more deeply, that some children do not grow as straight as the saplings in the forest. They pray to their ancestors, they bury their dead under the floors of their houses to keep them close, and they keep grinding the grain, the sound echoing through the valleys like a mantra. Grind, grind, grind. They are locking themselves into a biological corner. To survive on this new diet of bread and clouds, something has to give. The body cannot change the sun, and it cannot easily change the food once the population has grown too large to return to the hunt. So, the body must change itself. The pressure is building, silent and immense, pressing against the genetic code. Every child born with skin slightly lighter than their parents has a microscopic advantage, a tiny window of transparency that lets in just a fraction more light, creating just a few more molecules of the vital nutrient. It is not a race, it is a drift. It is the slow, ruthless math of natural selection beginning to do its work. The dark skin of the South is being selected against, not by a predator, but by the bread. The farmers look up at the gray sky, praying for rain for their crops, unaware that their bones are praying for something else entirely, for the clouds to part, and for their own skin to fade, to lose its memory of the desert and become like the mist itself. The tension in the villages is not just social, but cellular. The mixture of the dark-skinned hunter-gatherers and the olive-skinned farmers creates a patchwork of humanity, a genetic experiment running in real time across the continent. They trade amber and flint, they trade stories and seeds, and unknowingly, they trade the genes that will determine the future face of the world. But for now, the hunger remains hidden. The firelight flickers on faces that are still rich with color, illuminating the sweat of the harvest. The smell of baking bread fills the air, a smell of safety, of home, and yet, the smell of the very thing that is forcing them to shed their ancient armor. The sun dips low, a pale coin behind the clouds, knocking gently on the door of the skin, waiting for the day it will finally be allowed in. Let us descend now, deeper than the skin, past the muscle and the sinew, into the quiet white architecture of the body itself. We go to the bone, the silent scaffold that holds the human shape against the gravity of the earth. In the darkness of the body's interior, the bone is not dead stone. It is a living, breathing landscape, a constant construction site where microscopic cells are endlessly tearing down the old and rebuilding the new, a process as rhythmic as the tides. But to build a fortress, one needs mortar, and to build a skeleton, one needs calcium. The farmers of the Neolithic have plenty of calcium in their environment. It is in the water, in the greens, in the milk of their goats. But the body has a locked door. Calcium cannot simply walk into the blood. It must be escorted, and the guide is a molecule born of the sun. This is the ancient pact we made with the star. The skin drinks the light, and in return, the body is granted the power to harden its frame. But here, in the cloudy north, amidst the fields of wheat that block the mineral's absorption, the pact is broken. The dark skin, perfect for the equator, stands like a heavy curtain across the window. It absorbs the meager ultraviolet rays of the European autumn before they can reach the deep layers where the magic happens. The chemical reaction that should turn the sun into strength simply fails to ignite, and so the bone begins to starve. It is a silent hunger, felt not as a rumble in the stomach, but as a deep, dull ache in the hips and the spine, a weary heaviness that settles into the limbs of the people as the winter stretches on. The skeleton, deprived of its solar mortar, remains soft. It bends where it should stand rigid. This is the era of the soft bone, a time when the human frame begins to buckle under the weight of its own existence. It is gentle at first, a child walking with a slight curve in the legs, a heaviness in the gait, but the evolutionary pressure it creates is the most powerful force in human history. It is a pressure that falls heaviest on the women. Consider the young mother in the Neolithic village. She is the pinch point of evolution, the narrow gate through which the future must pass. Her pelvis is a ring of bone that must be strong enough to carry her through the harvest labor, yet flexible enough to birth a child. But the lack of sun and the shift to grain have weakened this cradle. If the pelvis softens and deforms, the gate closes. The child cannot be born. The lineage ends. This is the brutal, silent mathematics of survival. It is not war or predation that threatens these people most. It is the geometry of their own hips. And this is why the change, when it comes, is so swift and so total. Nature is ruthless when it comes to birth. Any woman whose skin is even a fraction lighter, whose genetic code allows for a slightly thinner shield, lets in more light. She makes more vitamin D, her bones stay straighter, her pelvis remains wide and true. She survives the birth, and her child survives with her, carrying that same trait of lighter skin into the next generation. It is not a choice. It is a filter. The dark-skinned lineages, so majestic and successful in the time of the hunters, begin to struggle here. They face a higher toll in childbirth, a higher rate of infection, a general weakening that makes the harsh winters harder to endure. The prayer of the bone is a desperate request for transparency. The body is begging the skin to get out of the way, to lower the shield, to let the sky touch the blood. We can imagine the scene in the smoky interior of a longhouse, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. A grandmother rubs the legs of a child who cries from the deep growing pains of rickets, though they do not have a name for it. She sings a lullaby, her hand moving over the dark skin that she loves, the skin that protected her ancestors on the savannah, unaware that this very protection is the cause of the child's pain. It is a tragic irony. The armor has become the cage. Outside, the rain falls on the thatched roof, a cold gray curtain that hides the sun for weeks. The wheat in the storage pits is dry and safe, promising they will not starve. But the wheat is a jealous provider. It fills the belly but denies the bone. It contains phytates, acids that bind to calcium and strip it from the body, making the shortage even worse. The agricultural revolution has created a perfect storm of deficiency: low sunlight, high-grain diet, and dark skin. The human organism is resilient, but it cannot fight physics. Something has to yield. The skin must lose its color, or the people will fade away. And so, slowly, imperceptibly, the tide turns. It happens in the silence of the womb, in the shuffling of the genetic deck. The gene variants for depigmentation, which may have existed as rare anomalies or dormant possibilities, suddenly find themselves favored. They are no longer mistakes, they are solutions. A child is born here and there with a complexion that looks washed out to the elders, perhaps even sickly, lacking the rich, healthy earth tone of the tribe. But this pale child is a sponge for the light. Even on a cloudy day, their skin drinks in the radiation, their bones harden, they grow tall and straight. They run faster, work harder, and most importantly, the women among them birth children with ease. They are the answer to the bone's prayer. As the centuries drift by, these lighter individuals become more common, not because they conquered the others, but because their children survived the winter. The darkness of the skin is not lost in a careless way. It is sacrificed, traded away by the body in exchange for a strong skeleton. It is a high price: the loss of protection against folate destruction, the loss of the camouflage of the night. But the body pays it willingly to escape the trap of the soft bone. The sun is a strict master. It demands that we either hide from it or open ourselves to it, depending on where we stand on the earth. And here, in the gray, grain-fed north, the command is clear: open. Let the light in. Let the barrier dissolve. The ancient father-sun is still there, behind the clouds, waiting to help, but he can no longer shout. He can only whisper. And to hear a whisper, the skin must become thin, sensitive, and pale as the winter sky. The village sleeps, and in the marrow of the sleeping children, the chemistry of the future is being written, one calcium atom at a time, guided by the silent, desperate need for the light that lies hidden behind the clouds. We tend to think of history as being written by the clash of armies or the rise of kings, but the true authors of our existence are far smaller, working in the microscopic silence of the cell, writing their story in the invisible ink of the genetic code. Here, in the damp river-veined heart of the continent, amidst the thatch-roofed villages and the muddy tracks of the cattle, a typo occurs. It is not a grand declaration, but a flicker, a random meaningless error in the copying of a DNA strand during the quiet assembly of a new life. A single nucleotide is swapped, a G becomes an A, a tiny chemical stutter in a gene that scientists will one day label SLC24A5, but which at this moment is simply a mystery wrapped in a newborn's cry. The child is born into the firelight, and as the midwife wipes away the vernix, a hush falls over the room. The skin of this infant is different. It is not the rich, deep brown of the mother, nor the olive tawny shade of the father. It is pale, shockingly so, like unbaked clay or the foam on the river's edge. It looks raw, unfinished, as if the child has been born before the sun had a chance to kiss it. In the mythologies of the tribe, this might be seen as an omen, a touch of the spirits, perhaps a sign of sickness or a blessing from the moon. But in the cold, unfeeling logic of biology, it is simply a mutation, a broken shield. The ancient machinery that pumps melanin into the skin cells has been jammed. The pigment, that dark umbrella that has protected the lineage for 1,000 centuries, has failed to open fully. The child is, in a sense, naked. If this child had been born back in the Rift Valley, under the vertical hammer of the equatorial sun, this mutation would have been a death sentence. The skin would have blistered and burned, the folate in the blood destroyed, the lineage ended before it began. But nature is a gambler, and context is everything. Here, under the brooding cloud-choked skies of the Danube Basin or the northern forests, this defect is a secret superpower. The pale skin is a window thrown wide open. Watch the child grow, running through the tall grasses that brush against their strange light limbs. While the darker cousins play in the same weak sunlight, their melanin unwittingly fighting off the very rays they need, this pale child is absorbing everything. The skin is transparent to the ultraviolet B radiation. It drinks it in greedily, funneling the energy deep into the dermis where the cholesterol waits to be turned into vitamin D. It is a terrifying efficiency. 10 minutes of exposure for this child is worth 2 hours for the others. As the winter sets in, locking the world in gray ice, the difference begins to manifest in the quiet architecture of the body. While others in the village might complain of deep bone aches or suffer from the softening that curves the legs and narrows the hips, this pale child grows straight and true. Their immune system, fortified by the vitamin, fights off the respiratory infections that sweep through the close quarters of the longhouse. They are the fittest, not because they are stronger or smarter, but because they are bleached. They are a creature of the new latitude. And because they are healthy, they survive to adulthood. They find a mate. And here's the power of the drift. They pass the typo on. The gene for paleness is sticky. It is dominant in its utility. It sweeps through the population not by conquest, but by the simple fact that the children who carry it are more likely to survive the dark winters to have children of their own. It is a selective sweep, a wildfire in the blood. Scientists looking back at the genomic history of Europe are often stunned by the speed of this transformation. It seems to happen in the blink of an evolutionary eye. One moment, the population is dark. A few thousand years later, the mutation is everywhere. It is as if the continent itself decided it wanted to be lighter. But we must remember the trade-off, the silent biological contract that is being signed here. By losing the melanin, this new lineage is losing its armor. They are becoming sensitive, easily burned, prone to damage if they ever wander back towards the south. They are trading the protection of the equator for the absorption of the pole. They're becoming specialized, tethered to the low-light world. The whiteness is not a uniform. It is a scar of adaptation, a mark of how desperate the body was for the sun. As the generations pass, the village begins to look different. The faces around the fire are no longer a uniform deep brown. There is a mosaic of tones, dark hunters who still rely on the fish, olive farmers from the south, and now these pale-skinned mutants, the children of the mist. They mix and marry, their bloodlines braiding together like the currents of the great river. You can see the change in their eyes, too, the blue eyes of the hunter-gatherers, which had existed long before the pale skin, now finding a match in the light complexion. A new phenotype is coalescing, a face that we would recognize today as European, though it is still unfinished, still cooking in the slow oven of the north. The golden mutation, as it is sometimes poeticized, lightens the skin significantly, but it does not yet bring the extreme, rosy white pallor of the modern north. That final bleaching is yet to come. For now, the people are a beautiful, chaotic blend, a testament to a species in transition. They are walking the razor's edge between the need for folate and the need for vitamin D, balanced between the burn and the rickets. And all the while, the mutation drifts silently from mother to child, a ghost in the cell, rewriting the surface of the human race to match the gray sky above them. It feels like a loss of color, a fading away of the rich history of the South, but in the quiet, desperate calculation of survival, it is a gain. It is the body saying yes to the feeble light, accepting the risk of the burn to secure the strength of the bone. And so the skin fades, generation by generation, like a piece of cloth left out too long in the sun and the rain, until the memory of the equator is nothing more than a recessive whisper in the blood, and the people become as pale as the flour they grind, as light as the clouds that watch over them. Turn your face now to the east, away from the damp enclosed forests of the Atlantic and the settled smoke-filled valleys of the farmers, and look toward the rising sun. Here, the world opens up into something terrifyingly vast, a landscape where the earth and the sky seem to be the only two characters left in the story. This is the steppe, the Pontic-Caspian grassland, an ocean of green and gold that stretches for thousands of miles, uninterrupted by mountain or sea. A place where the wind gathers a speed that can knock a man down. In this endless rolling expanse, a new kind of human storm is gathering, one that will sweep across the continent and change the face of humanity forever. Listen closely, and you might hear it, not the scratching of the hoe in the soil, nor the silent stalk of the hunter, but a low, rhythmic thunder that vibrates through the soles of the feet. It is the sound of hooves, thousands of them, and beneath that, a deeper, grinding bass note, the sound of solid wooden wheels turning on heavy axles, crushing the wild thyme and the wormwood. The horse lords are coming. They are the Yamnaya, the people of the pit graves, and they are unlike anyone the Western world has seen before. While the farmers in the West have been shrinking, bending over their grain, growing shorter and more fragile with every generation of hard labor and limited diet, these people of the steppe have grown massive. They are the giants of the Bronze Age, towering over their contemporaries, their bones dense and thick, their muscles fed by a diet that is rich, bloody, and entirely mobile. They do not wait for the harvest. They chase it. They have domesticated the horse, not just as food, but as a partner, a terrifying elevation that lifts them 6 feet into the air and allows them to move at the speed of a gallop. They have invented the wagon, a mobile home that allows them to untether themselves from the geography of caves and villages. They are the first true nomads, the masters of the horizon, and they carry a genetic secret in their blood, a legacy from the frozen wilds of Siberia and the ancient North Eurasians who once hunted mammoths in the deep polar night. This ancestry has gifted them with a unique biological package. Their skin is light, perhaps slightly different in tone from the farmers, less olive, more pale, stripped of color by the long millennia their ancestors spent in the high northern latitudes where the sun is a rare and precious guest. But it is not just their skin, it is their metabolism. They have learned to drink the milk of their animals. They consume vast quantities of yogurt, cheese, and fresh milk, a portable solar energy that floods their bodies with calcium and fat, keeping their skeletons hard as iron even under the grayest skies. They do not suffer from the soft bone. They are robust, terrifyingly healthy, and restless. As the climate shifts, turning their grasslands dry and brittle, they begin to move west. It is not an invasion in the modern sense, with maps and generals, but a migration of necessity, a spilling over of populations seeking better grazing for the great herds of cattle and sheep that flow around their wagons like a living tide. They ride out of the sunrise, silhouetted against the morning light, their hair often lighter, their eyes a mix of the hunter's blue and the farmer's brown. When they reach the edges of the settled lands, the collision is silent, but catastrophic. The farmers of old Europe, the builders of the great stone circles and the longhouses, are in decline. Their populations are dense but sickly, riddled with the plague that has begun to fester in their crowded villages, their bodies weakened by the grain trap. They look up from their fields to see these towering figures riding down from the hills, men who seem merged with their beasts, moving with a fluid, terrifying grace. The encounter is a meeting of 2 different times, the slow, cyclic time of the planter and the fast, linear time of the rider. And in this meeting, the genetic map is redrawn once again. The DNA of the horse lords pours into the gene pool of the West like fresh water into a stagnant pond. It is a massive replacement, a demographic shift so profound that in some places Nearly all the men of the previous era vanish from the lineage, replaced by the Y chromosomes of the steppe. But with this surge of new blood comes the final ingredient for the white skin we recognize today. The Yamnaya bring the genes for tall stature, correcting the shrinkage of the farmers. They bring the genes for lactose tolerance, allowing the adults to drink milk and survive the dark winters without relying solely on the sun. And they bring the SLC45A2 variant, another potent mutation for depigmentation that works in tandem with the farmer's lighter skin to scrub the last remnants of the equatorial brown from the population. It is a bleaching event, the combination of the farmer's pale olive adaptation and the steppe nomad's northern pallor creates a skin type that is almost transparent, a canvas so light that the blood vessels beneath show through as a flush of pink. This is the birth of the rosy complexion, a trait born not of beauty, but of the desperate need to capture every single photon of light in a world of rain and fog. The horsemen do not know they are engineers of the human body. They only know that they are strong, and the people they meet are weak. They settle in the valleys, their horses grazing on the stubble of the wheat fields. They bury their dead in great mounds, kurgans, that rise above the flat earth like artificial hills, markers of their dominance. Over centuries, the violence of the arrival fades and the populations merge. The distinct lines between the dark hunter, the olive farmer, and the pale horseman begin to blur. A new people is forged in the cool crucible of Europe, a people who carry the height of the steppe, the endurance of the farmer, and the eyes of the hunter. They are a patchwork of migrations, a living history book where every chapter is written in a slightly lighter shade of melanin. The sun, watching from above, sees the continent change color. What was once a land of dark, rich earth tones becomes a land of pale faces, a mirror reflecting the clouds. The whiteness is now complete, or nearly so, a biological suit of armor against the vitamin deficiency that had threatened to break them. The horse lords brought the wheel and the wagon, yes, but their most lasting legacy was the ghost they carried in their skin, the final fading that allowed humanity to thrive in the shadow of the north. The wagons stop rolling, the wheels sink into the mud, and the nomads become settlers, their fierce, restless energy grounding itself in the soil, their blood mixing with the earth, waiting for the final test of the ultimate north, where the sun will disappear almost entirely. The dust of the migration settles, and the thunder of the hooves fades into the soft rhythmic drumming of the rain, leaving behind a silence that feels different, not empty, but pregnant with the possibility of something new. We are entering the long, quiet afternoon of the Bronze Age, a time when the great collisions of history transform into the intimate, everyday reality of living together. The era of pure lineages is over. The world is no longer divided into the dark hunter of the woods, the olive farmer of the valley, and the pale rider of the steppe. Instead, the boundaries are beginning to dissolve, melting like snow in a warm spring. It is the time of the great weaving. Imagine a loom, vast as the continent itself, where the threads of human history are being pulled together by the patient hands of time. The black thread of the Western hunter-gatherer, deep and ancient as the peat bog. The tawny, earth-colored thread of the early European farmer, warm as baked clay. And the bright, bleached thread of the steppe herder, pale as the winter sky. They are being knotted, crossed, and intertwined to create a tapestry that has never been seen before. In the villages that dot the landscape, from the Rhine to the Vistula, you can see this merger happening in the faces of the people gathered around the evening fire. Look closely at the young woman spinning wool by the hearth. She has the height of her steppe ancestors, tall and long-limbed, but her hair is the dark, curling mane of the Mediterranean farmers, and her eyes, startling and bright, carry the electric blue of the ancient hunters who once stalked the reindeer. She is a living mosaic, a biological map of three worlds colliding. It is a slow, intimate process, this blending. It happens not on the battlefield, but in the quiet moments. A shared meal of cheese and flatbread, a glance exchanged across a muddy cattle pen, a marriage arranged between a family of sowars and a family of herders to keep the peace. The genetic distance between these groups was once vast, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years of distinct evolution, but now love and survival are bridging the gap. The result is a population of immense diversity and vigor. We might imagine that the white European looked the same everywhere, but in this moment of mixing, there is no standard face. There are brothers born of the same mother, where one carries the olive tint of the south and the other the rosy flush of the north. There are clans where the ability to drink milk, that gift from the steppe, is the difference between life and death in a harsh winter, and those who possess it slowly outlive those who do not. It is a silent winnowing. The genes are shaking hands, testing their compatibility, discarding what doesn't work and keeping what does. And the skin is settling. The dark pigmentation of the hunter, so beautiful and so ancient, is being overwhelmed by the double dose of lightning genes from the farmer and the herder. It is retreating into the recessive shadows of the code, hiding in the DNA, occasionally resurfacing in a summer tan, but largely vanishing from the baseline phenotype. The population is becoming uniformly paler, not out of vanity, but out of the sheer relentless pressure of the latitude. The patchwork is bleaching out. The sun is simply too weak to support the old colors. But there is something poetic in what remains. The blue eyes of the dark hunters, that striking ghostly trait that evolved in the deep Mesolithic, do not vanish. They detach from the dark skin they were born with and latch onto the pale skin of the newcomers. It is a strange, beautiful accident of history, the eyes of the nightwalkers finding a home in the faces of the daywalkers. This combination, pale skin and blue eyes, which we often think of as the quintessential northern look, is actually a relatively new invention, a remix of ancient parts that had never belonged together before. It is a souvenir from the lost tribes, a way for the vanished hunters to keep watching the world through the faces of their descendants. As the centuries drift by, the culture blends just as the blood does. The pottery styles merge, the corded impressions of the herders appearing on the clay vessels of the farmers. The burial mounds of the steppe are adopted by the people of the plow. A new language spreads, the ancestor of the tongues we speak today, carrying words for wheel, wool, and horse, but also words for grain and field. It is a synthesis of soil and speed, and in this synthesis, the human body becomes a marvel of adaptation. The skeleton hardens, fortified by the dairy diet and the vitamin D absorbed through the lightening skin. The height returns, the people growing tall again after the millennia of Neolithic shrinking. They are ready. They have the tools, the animals, and the biology to push even further, to go where the farmers could not go alone, to the very edges of the habitable world. The weaving is nearly complete. The distinct threads are becoming hard to see, lost in the unified pattern of the cloth. But there is one final frontier left, one place where the light is so scarce, the winter so long, and the sky so heavy that even this new, pale mixture is not quite enough. To the north, along the shores of the Baltic Sea, the sun is a fleeting rumor, and the test of the skin is about to reach its absolute limit. The white we know is not yet finished. It has one final ghostly transformation to undergo in the land of the midnight sun, where the weaving will be stripped of almost all its color, leaving only the raw, transparent fabric of survival. Let us follow the rivers north, tracing the veins of the continent until the land begins to fracture and dissolve into the cold gray embrace of the sea. We are drifting toward the Baltic, the rim of the inhabited world, a place where the map seems to fray at the edges, turning into a labyrinth of islands, peninsulas, and inlets that are locked in a lover's embrace with the ice for half the year. The light here is different from anywhere else we have been. It does not pour. It filters. It struggles through layers of heavy, moisture-laden air, bouncing off the surface of the leaden water, arriving at the human eye not as a beam, but as a diffuse silver wash. To live here is to live in a perpetual twilight, a world where the sun is a miser, hoarding its gold below the horizon, offering only a few fleeting hours of pale illumination before the long blue night descends again. It is here, in this beautiful, melancholy landscape of birch forests and sea mist, that the human body undergoes its most radical and final transformation. The weaving of bloodlines we saw in the south, the mix of the dark hunter, the olive farmer, and the steppe rider, reaches this northern outpost and hits a wall of absolute necessity. The latitude here is unforgiving. At 55, 60 degrees north, the angle of the sun is so low that the UVB radiation, the specific wavelength needed to spark the creation of vitamin D, is scattered and absorbed by the atmosphere long before it touches the ground. For months at a time, from late autumn to early spring, the vitamin winter descends. Even if you stood naked in the snow at noon, the sun would give you nothing. The factory in the skin shuts down completely. Survival here becomes a game of hoarding. The body must capture every single photon that falls during the short manic burst of summer, storing it away in the fat and the liver to last through the starving darkness of the winter. And to do this, the skin must lose everything. It must strip away every last vestige of the ancient protection. The melanin, which was once a shield against the equatorial hammer, is now a curtain that must be torn down. In the south, a little pigment was fine. Here, any pigment is a thief. It steals the light that the bone desperately needs, and so the bleaching begins. It is not a violent process, but a silent, relentless pressure applied by the climate itself. We see the populations that settle here, the battle-axe cultures, the coastal fishermen who are slowly turning to farming, and we watch them fade. The olive tones of the Mediterranean farmers, which had survived in the central valleys, simply cannot hold on here. The children born with that warmer, darker skin find themselves at a disadvantage too great to overcome. They struggle to grow, their immune systems falter in the damp cold, their mothers struggle in childbirth as the pelvis narrows from the lack of calcium. They are loved, they are cared for, but the environment is a strict filter, and slowly, gently, their lines fade into the background. In their place, the typo we saw earlier, the mutations for depigmentation, becomes the law. The gene variants that strip the skin of color, which were just one option in the south, become the only option in the north. The population is scrubbed clean of color. The skin becomes pinkish white, a translucent membrane that is almost shockingly revealing. You can see the map of the veins, the blue rivers of blood pulsing beneath the surface. You can see the flush of heat or anger. You can see the very machinery of life working underneath. It is a skin that has surrendered its secrets to the sun, a skin that has made a total pact with the light. I will hide nothing if you only let me live. This is the birthplace of the phenotype we now associate with the far north, the platinum blonde hair, which is essentially hair that has lost its pigment, just like the skin. The gray and blue eyes that reflect the stormy sea, the pale, freckled complexion that burns in an hour if taken back to the tropics. It is a highly specialized, somewhat fragile adaptation, a biological suit of armor made of glass. Scientists looking at the DNA of ancient skeletons from this region see a selective sweep of incredible power. Within a few thousand years, the genes for dark skin are virtually exterminated from the local pool. It is one of the strongest signals of natural selection in the entire human genome. It tells us that this was not a matter of aesthetics or sexual preference, but of raw survival. To be dark here was to break. To be white was to bend. And amidst this bleaching, the culture adapts to support the biology. The people here become obsessed with the sun. You can see it in their carvings, in the bronze discs they bury in the bogs, in the ships they draw on the rocks that seem to carry the sun across the sky. They know, in a deep intuitive way, that their lives hang by a thread of light. They build their lives around the return of the dawn. They drink the milk of their cattle with a fervor that matches the steppe nomads, for the milk is the only other source of the strength they need. It is a dual reliance, the white skin to catch the summer sun and the white milk to survive the winter dark. They are walking a tightrope over a chasm of nutritional collapse. As the skin lightens to the color of the birch bark, it allows them to push the frontier of agriculture further north than it should ever biologically go. They are farming at the edge of the impossible, growing crops in a land that wants to be ice, and their bodies have twisted and turned to make it possible. There is a haunting beauty to this adaptation. We often think of evolution as adding things, wings, claws, sharper eyes, but here evolution is an artist of subtraction. It is taking away. It is erasing the ink to leave the page blank. The people of the Baltic become the ghosts of the human family, the ones who have traveled so far from the African cradle that they have lost the very color of their origin. Yet, in this loss, there is a gain. By becoming transparent, they have unlocked the north. They can stand on the shores of the freezing sea, under a sky that is more gray than blue, and thrive. They can build great halls of timber, forge bronze swords, and sail their ships into the mist, fueled by the tiny, precious harvest of light that their skin gathers like a net. The white human is not a conqueror of nature, but a product of it. A creature shaped by the absence of the sun, molded by the shadows, bleached by the relentless, indifferent gray of the northern sky. The wind howls across the open water, carrying the salt spray that freezes on their eyelashes, and they turn their pale faces upward, waiting for the clouds to break, waiting for the ancient father to smile upon them for just one more hour, knowing that their skin is ready to drink whatever he offers. The year turns, and the world closes its eye. We are now deep in the era of the winter that never ended, a time when the climate of the north took a sharp, cruel turn downward, plunging the people into a cold that felt personal, intelligent, and endless. The warm, wet abundance of the Atlantic period is gone, replaced by a dry, biting chill that freezes the breath in the throat before it can even leave the lips. The days contract with terrifying speed, the sun retreating like a coward behind the southern rim of the world, leaving the sky a bruised twilight purple for 18 hours a day. It is here, in this atmospheric dungeon, that the final polish is applied to the human form. We often imagine natural selection as a dramatic event, a tiger chasing a gazelle, a warrior striking down a rival. But in reality, and especially here in the frozen north, natural selection is a silent, boring, and heartbreaking filter. It is a sieve that sits over the cradle. It does not kill with violence. It simply nudges the probabilities. In these long, starving winters, where the grain stores run low and the cattle stand shivering in the byres, the margin for error vanishes. The body must work perfectly, or it will not last until the thaw. And the central cog in this biological machine is the skin. We have seen it lighten, seen it lose the rich melanin of the South, but now it must become something else entirely. It must become a lens. The people who survive this deepening cold are those whose skin has become so translucent, so stripped of pigment, that it acts almost like the clear ice on the lake, a medium that offers zero resistance to the light. It is a radical biological transparency. Watch the community moving through the snow-drifted village. They are wrapped in layers of wool and fur, their breath hanging in clouds around them, but their faces are exposed to the biting air. This small patch of skin, the face and the hands, is the only solar panel they have left. For the individuals who still carry a trace of the old olive tone, or even a heavy tan, the winter is a slow sentence of fading strength. Their bodies, confused by the lack of signal, begin to hoard resources, slowing down, weakening the immune response. A common cold, a bout of flu, a minor infection, things that should be shrugged off, become lethal because the body lacks the hormonal key turned by vitamin D. The silent filter works quietly in the night. It is the child who coughs and does not stop coughing. It is the elder who breaks a hip on the ice and does not heal. It is the mother whose labor stalls in the darkness. They do not die because they are weak. They die because they are mismatched. They are wearing sunglasses in a cellar. And conversely, look at the ones who thrive. Eating. They are the ghosts of the village, the ones with skin as pale as the milk they drink. For them, the weak gray light reflecting off the snow is enough. The snow itself becomes an ally. Its whiteness acts as a reflector, bouncing the scattered UV rays up from the ground, hitting the face from below, doubling the exposure. The pale skin drinks this reflected light greedily. It is a perfect closed loop of adaptation. The white snow selects for the white skin. Scientists studying the genetic history of this period notice a profound homogenization. The diversity we saw in the previous eras, the mixing of the dark, the olive, and the pale, begins to collapse into a singular uniform look. The environment is simply too harsh to allow for variation. It demands a specific uniform. To live in the winter that never ends, you must become the winter. You must reflect its colors. And so, the hair loses its pigment too, turning the color of dried straw or flax, or sometimes entirely white blonde in childhood, a mimicry of the frost. The eyes, having no need to shield against a glare that doesn't exist, settle into shades of gray, green, and blue, colors that scatter the low light rather than absorbing it. It is a form of camouflage, perhaps, but not to hide from predators. It is a camouflage of chemistry, matching the body to the energy level of the landscape. There's a deep, quiet melancholy to this time. The stories told around the fire change. They become tales of endurance, of waiting, of the sun as a distant, fickle lover who must be wooed back with rituals and fires. The people build great bonfires at the solstice, desperate to mimic the heat they lack, sending sparks up into the crushing black void of the night. They do not know that they are the fire. Their bodies are burning a fuel that is invisible, a chemical fire kept alive by the very transparency of their skin. It is a trade-off that leaves them incredibly vulnerable. Strip the furs from a man of this era and place him in the summer sun of his ancestors' homeland, and he would burn in minutes. He has lost the ability to protect himself from the very source of his life. He has become an obligate northerner, tethered to the high latitudes as surely as the reindeer. But in the winter, this vulnerability is his strength. The bleaching is complete. The gene variants for SLC24A5 and SLC45A2 are now fixed in the population, present in almost every single individual. The typo has become the text, and as the generations pass under the weight of the ice-heavy sky, the memory of the dark skin is finally, truly forgotten. It does not even exist in the myths anymore. The world has always been white. The people have always been pale. They cannot imagine a time when they did not look like the birch trees. The filter has done its work, sorting the souls of the north, keeping only those who could turn the leaden sky into gold. The village survives. The smoke rises. The pale children play in the drifts, their cheeks flushed pink with the blood that flows just beneath the surface, a signal of life in a world that looks dead. They are the survivors of the long squeeze, the beneficiaries of a ruthless mercy that stripped them naked to the light so that they might endure the dark. The silence of the snow is deep, covering the mounds of the ancestors who were too dark to last, leaving the world to the ghosts who learned to eat the dawn. And so we arrive at the finished work, the final sculpture, carved by the twin chisels of the famine and the frost. The skin is no longer a shield. It has become a membrane, a delicate living parchment that separates the inner ocean of the blood from the outer ocean of the air. It is the era of the ghost in the skin. If you were to look closely at the arm of a person from this time, really look, with the eyes of a focused observer drifting through the millennia, you would see that the color is not white, not truly. White is the color of chalk, of dead snow, of paper. This skin is something far more complex and fragile. It is the color of transparency. Without the heavy dark grains of melanin to act as a curtain, the skin has become a window into the body itself. The pinkish hue that flushes the cheeks and the chest is not a pigment. It is the blood, the very life force, pulsing through the capillaries, visible now to the naked eye because the ancient covering has been stripped away. It is a revealing, honest skin, unable to hide the rush of emotion, the heat of a fever, or the chill of the wind. When a man is angry, he turns red. When a woman is cold, she turns blue. The body has lost its mask. This is the biological reality of the trade-off, settled in the silence of the cells. The protection of the deep past, that robust, impenetrable armor that allowed our ancestors to walk the African savanna at high noon without fear, is gone. In its place is a vulnerability that is terrifying in its completeness. The sun, Once the benevolent father who could be trusted implicitly has become a complex, dangerous entity. The people of the north have gained the ability to survive the shadow, yes. They can drink the dregs of the winter light and turn it into strong, straight bone. They have escaped the trap of rickets, but they have walked into a new trap, one made of light itself. If they venture too far south, or if the summer sun breaks through the clouds with sudden, unexpected ferocity, they do not darken. They burn. It is a new sensation in the human story, this angry red inflammation, the skin crying out in pain as the ultraviolet rays smash into the unprotected DNA. The burn is the price they pay for the bone. It is the receipt for the transaction. The melanin that would have soaked up this violence is missing, sacrificed to the need for vitamins. Nature, in her ruthless accounting, decided that it was better to risk a burn on the surface than to risk a broken pelvis in the core. It is a calculation of immediate survival over long-term protection. The ghost in the skin is the absence of the ancestor, the empty space where the protection used to be. And yet, there is a strange power in this fragility. This skin, so easily damaged, is also incredibly sensitive. It feels the changing of the weather before the clouds arrive. It senses the shift in temperature with a keenness that a thicker shield might blunt. It is a skin designed for a world of subtlety, for a landscape of gray mists and dappled forests, where the light is a precious, rare commodity that must be hunted as surely as the deer. The people do not know the science of this. They do not know that they have lost the protection for folate, that vital nutrient that the sun destroys in pale skin, risking the health of the next generation if they are exposed to too much light. They only know that they belong to the shade now. They belong to the long twilights in the wooded valleys. They have become creatures of the edge, living in the borderlands where the light is safe. There is a quiet dignity in this adaptation, a resignation to the specific terms of their lease on the earth. They are no longer the universal humans who could walk anywhere. They are specialists, locked to the latitude. The ghost in their skin binds them to the north. It is a biological anchor. To leave this place, to walk back toward the equator, would be to walk into a fire they can no longer endure. And so they stay. They build their cultures around the hearth and the hall, around the protection of the roof and the cloak. They cover themselves not just for warmth, but for shade. The clothing becomes a second skin, replacing the melanin they have lost. We see the rise of intricate textiles, of heavy woolens and woven linens, the external armor replacing the internal one. The body has offloaded the job of protection to the mind and the hands. We solve with tools what we can no longer solve with biology. It is a profound shift in the strategy of life. The ghost is not dead. It is simply waiting, dormant. The genes for darkness are not entirely gone, perhaps. Some are broken, some are silenced, some are simply overwhelmed by the command to be pale. But the potential for color is largely erased. The slate has been wiped clean. In the deep winter nights when the aurora borealis twists its green and purple ribbons across the sky, the pale faces of the people turn upward, reflecting the celestial light like mirrors. They are one with their world now. The tension between the body and the environment has finally resolved. There is no more fighting against the gray sky. They have become the gray sky. They are the cloud made flesh. The ancient struggle of the hunter-gatherer to keep his bones strong in the forest, the desperate hunger of the early farmer eating his porridge in the gloom. It has all led to this. The solution is imperfect, as all evolutionary solutions are. It leaves them open to the sting of the sun, to the risk of cancer, to the destruction of nutrients in high light. But it allows them to live here. It allows the children to grow up. It allows the lineage to continue. And in the grand, uncaring arithmetic of deep time, that is all that matters. The ghost in the skin is a silent guardian, a specter of loss that allows for the presence of life. The trade is accepted. The contract is signed in the blood. They are the pale walkers, the ones who gave up the night to survive the winter, carrying the memory of the sun not in their skin, but in the desperate, hungry transparency that seeks it out, forever chasing the light that they can no longer safely hold. Step back now, letting the camera of your mind drift upward, higher and higher, until the individual fires of the villages merge into a single, flickering glow against the dark curve of the earth. We are no longer looking at a person, but at a map. A map not of borders or nations, but of light. Below us, the human body is revealed for what it truly is, a biological record of a journey that has lasted thousands of years, a living parchment upon which the sun and the soil have written the story of our survival. The skin we see now, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Arctic Circle, is not a static color, but a gradient of necessity, a beautiful shifting spectrum that tracks the exact angle of the sun's rays against the planet's tilt. It is a biological ledger, recording every calorie of grain eaten and every gram of fish swallowed. When we look at the paleness of the North, we are not seeing race or identity in the way our modern minds often misunderstand those words. We are seeing the geography of migration. We are seeing a record of how much light our ancestors were forced to chase and how much they were forced to sacrifice to keep their bones from breaking. The skin is a map of where the sun was missing. It is a record of the risk taken by those who walked into the shadow, of the farmers who chose the security of the wheat over the richness of the wild, and of the nomads who brought the strength of the horse to the valleys of the mist. Every freckle, every flush of pink, every transparent vein is a witness to a specific moment in deep time when the body had to make a choice. We carry the history of the earth in our very cells. The dark hunter's blue eyes still look out from pale faces. The farmer's height, once lost to the grain, has been restored by the herder's milk. The equator's protection has been traded for the pole's absorption. It is a masterpiece of adaptation, a testament to the fact that humans are not separate from the world, but are made of it, molded by its pressures like clay in a potter's hands. The whiteness we have followed is simply the result of a species that refused to stop moving, a species that found a way to inhabit the uninhabitable by turning its own skin into a window. We imagine that we are the masters of our environment, but as we look down at the prehistoric world, we see that we are its children, shaped by the wind, the clouds, and the silent requirements of the marrow. The story does not end with a victory, but with a quiet, ongoing balance. We are still that same species, still walking that same razor's edge between the need for the sun and the danger of its fire. Our bodies still remember the savanna even as they adapt to the snow. The past is not behind us. It is the very fabric of our being, the ghost in our skin that tells us where we have been and what it cost us to stay. As the world turns and the modern era begins to whisper on the horizon, the prehistoric silence remains at the core of our biology. We are the survivors of the long drift, the ones who learned to fade so that we would not vanish. The map is complete, written in the tones of our faces and the strength of our frames, a silent testimony to the thousands of winters we endured to reach this moment. The lights of the ancient world dim as the dawn of history approaches, but the skin remains, a living, breathing, ever-changing map of the sun's long shadow across the human heart. The great wildwood is silent now. The rhythm of the stone quern slows, the grinding sound fading into the soft patter of rain on a thatch roof. The ancient world, with its blue-eyed hunters and its giants from the steppe, begins to dissolve, receding into the mists of the long ago. The tension in the bone eases. The hunger for the light is satisfied. You are here, in the present, safe and unhurried, wrapped in the warmth of a world that was built for you by those who walked through the dark. The memory of the deep time remains, but it is a gentle weight now, like a heavy blanket that keeps the chill away. The sky is quiet. The earth is still. You can feel the slow, steady beat of your own heart, a rhythm that has not changed since the first fire was lit on the African plain. The journey is over for tonight. The map is folded and put away. There is nothing left to do but drift, letting the images of the golden wheat and the silver sea wash over you until they become the fabric of your dreams. You are held by the earth, part of the long, beautiful continuity of life. Sweet dreams.